Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here. It's quite a thing to see that I'm a world leader. I think as South Africa, I was looking at the numbers. Mexico is also a stressed area, and we live it every day. So that's what got me involved in working with the water footprint along the supply chain. So I'm very happy that I think the previous presentations are going to be complementary, and I'm going to touch a little bit on what the business perspective and also the government perspectives are. But when we were talking about water footprinting, to me, the first part is that we look at it from our everyday life perspective. And as consumers and as citizens of the world, we know that water impacts almost all of the aspects of our human activity. And that is the main point when we talk about water footprinting. We've been talking also about water, and when we talk about the management of water, we are basically talking about a small percentage of the total water that there is in the world, which is the freshwater resources. And there was some very nice statistics on South Africa, but it's mainly, I think, would say the same for all over the world. Agriculture takes the great part. And then you also find, well, some sort of different sources of water, the surface water, the groundwater, and then you had a really good presentation on how those are in South Africa. And then, well, there's a lot of things happening in the industry to become more efficient, and we are eating every day, and we should also have more efficient agricultural systems, and governments should be looking at that because they are taking 70% of those freshwater resources, and there's a lot of that taken into account when we talk about the water footprint. The previous presenter also was talking about water scarcity, water stress, and yeah, we feel it, we see it. If you live in a country like Mexico and you live in big cities, then you don't get water for almost 3 weeks. You have to be very, very efficient. We also know that even if there's water in some places, the water is polluted. So there are signs of that everywhere. And as consumers, we are really concerned about this. I like a lot what I'm presenting to you right now. This is a survey done by National Geographic and GlowScan. In fact, all the international market intelligence companies are actually asking about carbon and water and many other areas for the environmental issues that are important for society and for consumers. And well, this survey was done since 2008. You don't see South Africa there, but you will see the numbers for 2014. And I like it because they ask people what are the main important areas where you have concerns or where would you like to make some changes in your everyday habits. So yeah, people, and even Mexicans, I can tell you, we are very concerned about water shortages. We don't have water. And so it feels, and it's impacting our everyday life. So we got to be very conscious about that. You can see here, Chinese are more worried than Mexicans about water pollution, but in all the different countries as they've done this survey, you can see that we are worried about water. Water is used everywhere. We need it for our everyday needs, and we need it for our production processes, and it's just something that we cannot afford not to have. Starting 2014, the Greendex survey included South Africa. And it's a lot about consumer habits, patterns, and the thoughts of consumers in different places of the world. According to this study, South Africans are the 9th most concerned or more worried or more active people in the world towards environmental issues. I like to take some of the structs of what it says here because it is quite related to what we were talking about, freshwater consumption and agricultural activities. It says that, and you got to tell me if Greendex is right, that you're consuming locally grown food and you're less likely to consume imported food, which for the water footprint, we'll see that is a good thing to have. Now, something that you will think about later is that you consume a lot of beef and that also you consume lamb. So we'll see about the water footprint and the lamb and the chicken and the beef. And it also says that you do not consume that much bottled water, which is good, I think, if you talk about water footprint and the water consumption. So I hope this is you. At least this is what the Green Index says. Also, when you're talking about keeping it cool and warm in the houses, it says that, well, you use electricity to heat your houses. And if I'm not wrong, electricity is, so there's a lot of hydropower plants in South Africa. Is that right? Not many? Coal power, okay. So anyhow, so South Africans are less likely to minimize their use of fresh water, okay, but are more likely to wash their laundry in cold water to save energy. So there's a trade-off. Okay, it says you use water. Okay, this is another survey. This is Nielsen. Nielsen is a company widely known by market experts. And they also ask about the environmental issues. And you can see there that there's also a very concerned and quite concerned number of consumers all over the world. This is not only South Africa, this is all over the world, for the water shortages and the water pollution. So the previous presenters were talking about business and we're talking about the country level planning, so we are all worried about water. And this is, it has to be a sort of balance, a yin-yang I call it, among production and consumption, because companies can do a great job, but if we don't change the way we are consuming and we do things in our everyday life, then I don't know if the impacts are going to be less. Okay, so what do you see there? Are they footprints? Okay. I like to relate to this because, you know, we are using the term water footprint, carbon footprint, environmental footprint, and this footprint and that footprint. So when we see that mark, it's, you know, it relates to leaving that mark in the environment. And there are many different scientific approaches to what's called a footprint. When we talk about water footprint, there is a method that talks about how much water you're being used and how much water you need to clean the water that you have polluted. Okay, so it's a little bit of a depth sense to that. And there's another approach that actually tells you how big or what's the size of your feet and how big is the mark. And that is another approach that has been taken by the ISO. I mean, we're not saying the other approach is wrong or bad, it's just ISO has decided to use the one that gives you a quantity of that footprint. The first approach does relate to the supply chain. When you take water from one place and you incorporate it into a product that we use everywhere, you're actually depriving that water from the system. So you can see that there's a water sort of imports and exports when we are trading products that we don't see. And this is one of the aspects of talking about the water footprint. There's hidden water use in the supply chain. There's also, with this approach, you account for the number of liters for the volume of water that you use in every single stage of the life cycle of a product. So for example, the wine that is very nice and we import from South Africa in Mexico, just to drink that glass of wine takes 120 liters of water so that you can have that in your table. For you guys who love beef, okay, just to maintain that little cow or big one that's going to provide that nice meat, we need 3 million liters of water. Okay, this is just taking all the amount of water that you need in the life cycle of the product, and then here comes the beef. Okay, that is 1 kilogram of beef, and it is 15,500 liters. Okay, so this is the amount of water in all the different life cycle stages of a product coming to your house, to your table, in order to be able to get us, you know, to eat every day. And this is also important when we talk about agriculture. So there are two views of water footprinting. One is the volumetric assessment, which I just gave you, you know. Do you remember the number for the meat? 15,000. Just remember that whenever you buy the meat, okay? So there's another one, which is, like I said, the one from ISO. And if you look at the volumetric approach, the 140 liters to have a nice cup of coffee that we drink every morning. There was also basically back in 2009 many different approaches telling us that a water footprint is measured in different ways. So you could go to France, for example, and you can see it here, it's even in French. They have this initiative to have the footprints of products put in the labels. And so for water, you can see that it is a 0.3 liter equivalent, whatever that means. And then for 30 liters of water with a different methodology. So at some point, what we needed was a little bit of consensus. And back in 2009, we started to work with the ISO and the water footprint standard, the ISO 14046. So remember, ISO is about quantifying the environmental impact and giving you a number with two views. One is the availability or scarcity, or how stressed is the area where you're withdrawing the water from, and also trying to measure pollution in different ways. So one of the main principles of the water footprint is that you have to follow the amount of water that you're using when you are producing, you're transporting, you're packaging, and you are disposing of the product. So that is one of the main principles. And then also, the other one is that you account for the environmental impacts. And what we had ahead of us when we were doing this work in the ISO was that it's not only used for products. Usually the life cycle approach is used for products, but it had to be used also for organizations up to the country level, and also up to different types of decisions. So we developed the standard. I'm not going to go into details because I have another presentation and I don't want to bore you with all that. But what happened back then in 2009 is that we had 33 methodologies saying that they had the method for environmental footprint and for water footprint. So it was very difficult for us to try to come to a consensus, and at the end we had two main things as an agreement to what we wanted to write in the water footprint standard. First one is that a water footprint makes a link between consumption in one place and impacts on water systems on the other. And the other one was that we need to think about how stressed or how scarce is the area where we're withdrawing the water from. So our framework talks about water footprint with availability quantifications, degradation quantifications, up to areas of protection, like how this is going to affect human health, ecosystems, or resources. So with this in mind, it was mainly the idea to provide not only organizations and governments, but also consumers and designers, people that were putting those products in our tables, with a measure that gives you a number to think of and how to reduce the impacts along the value chain, and also in two different areas that are important, and we just saw that before. How scarce is the place where I'm withdrawing the water, because it's not fair that I buy an apple from one place and then maybe that place doesn't have water at all. That's the story with cotton, organic cotton, and it comes from places where there's no water. So the idea is that you think about the product, you think about how the product is being used, then you also think about the life cycle, the value chain. You think about the different environmental impacts, not only how scarce, but also if it's going to pollute water and how. And then this way you're able to quantify a footprint, put it in a label for products. That is happening, and it's coming really fast. Europe is actually working on a pilot project, which is called the product environmental footprint, with the water footprint component. So consumers are going to be facing those numbers, whatever they mean, and we need to work a lot in this education of society, like it was presented before, and this way we can talk about a water footprint. So it was just an introduction. I will talk more about the ISO 14046 later on. So I just hope this was also a good balance to the previous presenters. Thank you.